Good afternoon. We have a little ground to cover and we have to backtrack a little bit. Certain events have occurred which make it necessary. If you remember the second part of documentary 1, we were going through the tsunami and earthquake danger on the west coast USA. FEMA had issued a warning from Seattle to Baja, Lower California, to evacuate. Unfortunately, the geoplates, the geosubstructure, does not recognize any borders. As it stands, yes, I posted, but the United States government was quite aware of exactly what I was telling you, however, in detail, annotated with scientific documentation. Basically, with the amount of fracking, high pressure fracturing of the structure, substructure that was occurring in California, declared each time an oversight. Basically, they'd been high pressure utilizing the last potable water in California during a drought, mixing it with chemicals, injecting it, breaking directly through the soil, through several layers, down through the aquifers, the underground streams, which happen to go to the farmlands to extract oil, which they did. As they did, fields were full of oil, chemical, spoiled water, of course. I think it takes one drop for 20,000 gallons or 200,000 gallons of water to be ruined. Re-injecting it into the aquifers, along with, coincidentally, sulfurs, uraniums, other things were showing up. However, the point is, with that and the offshore drilling, it damaged the substructure, basically extremely cavernous, built pretty much on clay sand. It was all ocean, of course, floor at one time. It destabilized it, which is why the intense seismic activity. If we could here, I believe I started to show you, but this is during our last segment. I believe I showed you. This is lists which are available to you of seismic activity. This is for 1 week in California. Yes, there are over 20 pages. There are condensed synoptic versions which you can get. There's a couple more right there, I believe. Needless to say, it has been intense due to the fracking. Of course, the governor claimed it was all oversight, even though it was approved and run out of his office. However, the newspaper stories which I showed you, where he was asking fracking companies to frack his own property, tends to dispel that. However, with that, of course, investigations had determined several things. A, practically every nuclear facility in California was built on or near a fault line. The seismic activity was increasing, of course. Monitoring this for the month of July, August, even I believe June, find some very incredible results. Actually, it's scary. Anyway, following that, the investigations had expanded, of course. NAFTA, which proved they had been spraying death from above in over 11 different forms. It also proved that the quake swarms, as I said, which were destroying California, were due to that fracking and drilling, the practices. It additionally found it stimulated other investigations, CDCP, which proved they had inoculated 90 million Americans through their TB shots with cancer. Also, USGS, University of California, Oregon, seismic, quite a few others, that the West Coast was expecting a 9.0, 9.2 tsunami. The conditions almost exact to Japan before theirs. Following that, the U.S. mill shot one warhead into the oceanic tectonic plates. If I recall, I did bring up some of the similarities. Japan's fault line's approximately, oceanic, 800 miles long, straight, opposable to the island, and lined with clay, one pushing in and down on the other. They had also been previously warned of a 9.0, 9.2 tsunami by USGS and others, such as their universities, Europeans. They had increased seismic activity, were warned to evacuate, and subsequently the United States Navy admitted in Senate hearings after animals of all types, birds, hippopotamuses, dogs, agriculture, dropping dead globally all over the world. Each time the Navy had fired nuclear warheads into Japan's oceanic tectonic plates. About 2.5 months after that, they had their tsunami, which began the Fukushima event, entirely manipulated. Thanks to investigations, there was a moratorium on fracking, seeing as how the substructure was in such a threatening condition due to the previous practices. Along with that, all of the nuclear facilities in California were shut down. The last one, Concord, California, 2025, unless and until alternate energy is recommended and installed, which will happen now, of course. Following that, on the FEMA reports, if you go there, you will see the official Homeland Security websites. Their reports, I believe, is 17,000 pages, 17,000 pages of how they intend to rebuild this area after it is destroyed. Through all of their reports, USG, etc., aside from the fact that they say it will stimulate in one or two of the reports volcanic activity causing intensely aggravated casualties, you will see one of the top headings as far as sources, the White House. Following that, the Western Caucus, headed by Chairman Gasser, remember that name. Of all the members, only one came from California. Nobody recognizes him. He's not a congressman or senator. I imagine he is paid, if he even speaks English. The Western Caucus controlling these areas, approved by Don Trump, has rescinded the moratorium on fracking and expanded it, as well as offshore drilling. I had stated that there is no way around, there is no escaping, that it has started, will start chain reaction to which will not stop. And what we can see here is, I don't believe you can see it. The lighting's incorrect. A list which you can get off of the web of Synoptic, if they posted all of the earthquake activity for this month and last, it would be much more than 20 pages. That was 1 week, so we can assume there more than likely would be over 300 pages of that. But synoptically, 20 earthquakes in the past 24 hours. 164 earthquakes in the past 7 days, 1 week. 692 earthquakes in the past month, 30 days. 8,246 earthquakes in the past 365 days or year. Now it's over 9,000, obviously. Today, as of the 20th, 9/20, was a 3.7 in Bernie, California, a 3.7 in Kern, California, Sedaris Valley, 4.1, 6.5 in Ferndale, California, and then we have a list about a mile long, minute by minute. 24 minutes ago, 2.7, about 2 hours, 2.4, 2.3, 1.5, 2.7, 1.5 and below I don't think is listed, 3.7. We have quite a few. What did not make the papers is quakes have shattered quite a bit of California. They didn't put it in the newspapers, and I'm wondering why. Porque Wisama, Borom, Bucket, Pachamu, Nazi. Obviously not to embarrass and incriminate the Western Caucasus, the esteemed Chairman Garcia. I had stated, obviously, here, that as progression, what occurred during the bushwhacking era, of course, the Whacker Jr. had bankrupted, not sure how many businesses, but if you recall, Ghost Town, Coast to Ghost Town, United States of America, is Bush had the gall to get on national TV and offer to buy back all of the companies, corporations, banks he had bankrupted. Watching WAMO, quite a few others go down. Interesting. Everyone there lost most of their retirement. They took it and claimed they formed new departments, putting it into different investments, feeing it at 15 to 50 to 65% every time. Can't remember who ran them. But Chase, of course, had past rumors that they were insolvent. The point being is that the Whacker did buy with money he had raped from the United States of America. If you remember, not even schools. Most agencies, states declaring bankruptcy, couldn't function. With that, corporate lobbying, of course, where people are paid, politicians. Trump being a corporate brat and quite accustomed as his life, corporate arrangements. Garcia, we don't know how much they were paid by corporate lobbying to do fracking, but oil companies, of course, owned by Bush, the Texas syndrome. We can recall the oil companies which were co-owned by Bush Jr. and Osama bin Laden. Interesting. Lobbied and reversed the fracking. Here is earthquake activity synoptic. It looks pretty much like California, seeing as how the difference between California and Mexico is basically Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's imposed imaginary line. 4 earthquakes as of the 20th, past 24 hours. 69 earthquakes in 1 week. 292 earthquakes in a month. 1,709 earthquakes in 365 days. Let's see. Yesterday, 4.7, 7.1, which was destroyed. They had another 7.1 or 7.8, and 8.1, A few hours before that, another 2.3, 2.7, 4.7, 4.6, 4.6, 4.9, 7.1, 1.8, 2.6, 5.4. The list goes on and on and on. Obviously, it is exactly as I stated, when I stated, where I stated. Imagine that. It is logic. Disturbing a unstable substructure, which is very complex, venular actually. Here, as we know, that as I've stated, built mostly on sand and clay. The sand washes away, the clay collapses. The caverns all through the western hemisphere pretty much collapsing now. It forms different structural members, not simple columns, but very complex, like honeycombs. Taking the oil, which is not the oil you're used to putting into your car, but it's more like the tar you've seen being put on roofs. Very much like that. It works as the perfect pad, cushioning the constant motion. As we know, as of the activity of Bush firing nukes into the Earth's core to rupture it, which he did, is it basically the Earth, an orb, not a perfect sphere, spinning at very high speeds, maintains, it holds on to the water, the land masses, has honed it perfectly. Taking a stick or something and pushing it off its center, which it did, almost 12 degrees. Now it has reached with that almost 12 degrees. I believe it was 11.37, advanced to 11.49 now, approximately 12. Following that, the event they caused in Japan tilted it another 3 degrees. We're at about 15 degrees off center now. From what I understand, it is progressing at an additional 1 degrees tilt at regular increments now. The snowball effect. They've started a chain reaction. If the Three Gorges Reservoir, Communist China, are complete, it will tilt it another 3. I'm not sure about the tsunamis in Thailand through the rest of the world, what they've done. Basically what I contended, if you recall, is doing that where the center is here, spinning, as it should. It now is here, where it's wobbling and creating a shake through the interior, transferring to exterior mass, and we begin to sculpt off parts of land mass and displace water. That is what's happening. Apparently, 2 days after I released that, the scientific world released findings that the Earth is shaking and displacing its masses due to being off center. Here, I'm not sure, hopefully this image will show. It did very well. This is one among thousands. Quake. You can see one major building collapsed another. There's just dozens of them, buildings, high-rises that just toppled over. And they were very adamant about putting in a lot of pictures of families actually grieving. Why? Porque is usually the children, infants, and older people were the first crushed. The reality of earthquake is not cinematic. As overpasses collapsing, to look at hundreds of cars smashed by the overpasses that you see driving, sometimes daily, with people being crushed. At first screaming, then they don't have the breath, trapped by the metal, the gases, the oil, their own leavings, people during accidents. Giving up on hope, the same as in buildings where tons and tons of concrete, many people would say, well, they dig in and imagine a parking garage, which you've been in numerous times. Only the concrete is thicker and the walls are more solid. Being in the sub-basement level 2 or 3 when that collapses. Now add in all of the furniture, all of the plumbing, the electrical, the HVAC, everything else. Keepsakes, refrigerators, appliances, roof, etc. is no. I wonder if Trump is actually going to take the time to view the films, some security films, and watch women, children, infants, people, older people, being crushed. And their fluids being forced out of them, their last thoughts, is it was so unexpected. I stated, and I did make official statements, as I said, annotated with ample evidence that this would happen. Starting down south of LA, increasing up through central North California. As I was saying, in Vallejo, California, almost every gas main broke. That didn't make the news. It happened all over the state. As in the San Bruno event, where one gas pipe was ruptured, and quite a few city blocks were blown up. It's pretty lucky, I guess, that not one spark or cigarette set that off. The city wouldn't exist anymore, along with quite a few other cities. But let's all rejoice. It's an event to rejoice. Donald Trump and Chairman Gosser, along with the others who approve this, are receiving more money. Now, isn't that something? Isn't that just a well worth trade? To trade lives and, as I said, cultures, civilizations, after decades and hundreds of years, actually longer in some instances, thousands of years, different regions acquire a culture of their own. Ours is being destroyed. That is a fact. And yes, they were amply warned. Trump had all the information, including what it would cost to rebuild versus what money went to his pocket. Gosser and quite a few other congressmen, the government was notified. The Hill knew. And they opted anyway to go for pocket change. To them, what it is, balanced. The life of expectant children and people. Their dwellings, the buildings they're used to, the ground they walk on, the sewers, the services, gas, water, electrical, and then stimulating volcanic activity, just like USGS started. It was already stated and co-signed by the White House, but before that. Cities, towns, communities full of lives. Take a look at your community with the churches, the PTA, the parks, the pucks, utility workers, people back and forth to work on buses, in bars, in high-rises, in their homes. crushed versus the money that did they really need. It was a cold decision they made. I had also stated it would start the snowball effect. As I was saying, we have already been warned. The White House is one of the agencies listed there that it is not a matter of if, but when it is going to happen. This expedites everything. The cavernous, the venular, honeycomb quality of this entire region, which serves as part of the Great Design's purpose, which means underground streams which go all over the world. They help cooling, they help irrigating, they keeping the earth alive, which it actually is. Funny, but the air is its breath. The water is its blood. With the core of the earth ruptured, everything is heating up. For anyone who doesn't believe in global warming, aside from taking a look at the findings that the same scientists who warned hole in the ozone, hothouse effect, greenhouse effect, ozone depletion, everything else, are stating now that we may have 20 to 50 years left of oxygen, of air, should things continue. Water's pretty much the same time, seeing as how it is pumped through some reactors at 170 million gallons a minute. Treated with radioactivity, quite a bit of it smashed atomically for its electrons to go to waste. With the hazardous waste that's here, aside from the import from Fukushima, which has now reached over 1.5 million tons, that's times 2,000 pounds each. The nuke facts that are left up and down the coast, Seattle, etc. The proper seismic event will decimate everything. North Korea doesn't have to shoot a nuclear missile here. They don't have to do a damn thing. Bush has already accomplished it. That is a fact. Before the event and manipulation of each devastation, Vax, NASA spraying everything, was a phone call from Bush. Bush through Cheney. We are in the most important phase of our lives, our history, not as just a nation, but as a civilization. The earth tilting, all of the damage and destruction cannot be avoided. People concerned about Nibiru, Anunnaki passing by. The great designer did not design this planet, this system, to be destroyed. Other astral bodies, one that was predicted to destroy the Earth, a great asteroid, what did they give it, a female name? Skimmed by here, yesterday, a couple of days ago, nothing happened. Not even, it didn't pull any water, didn't even cause a flood. I don't think even that a cosmetologist broke a fingernail. But the Earth is now officially on its path to destruction. I believe that every problem is an opportunity for improvement. If it was caused by man, it can be resolved. There are substances that attract heat. The lava is forcing its way up through honeycombs meant to be empty or contain air and water to circulate. Something must be able to draw that lava back down. There are substances that harden immediately in contact with cold, with water, with heat. The heat alone. If the lava can be forced back into its core area or drawn back in, the core can be restructured with missiles meant to break open and deploy substances that can patch it like a cast. Excuse me. With everything that occurs, I do not understand. I can't comprehend certain things. I have stated before, why would entities attempt to destroy the entire Earth? I have the answers, knowing that they're on it. Well, delusion has a great deal. Evolutionary, delusional beliefs have quite a bit to do with it too. Bad habit. Don't pick it up, kids. If the one world order, and I'm sorry, not to digress, but as I was saying, anyone who doesn't believe in global warming, come drink the ocean water with a desalinization tool. It's good enough for the U.S. Navy. Military personnel, it's good enough. It damn sure is good enough for you. Locate where the hole in the ozone is and go there. Stand underneath there, bare-topped, no hat. It bakes goats, it bakes people. Visit the North and South Pole and see it decimated. Gone. It's melting. Discovery of mammoths in it. It doesn't work anymore. Brazilian forest, rainforest, incredible. Just incredible. Gone. Along with the rain. How many years did we not have snow in areas such as the East Coast where we normally do? How many years did we have drought in areas? If anybody does not believe in global warming, you are a certifiable idiot, a moron. Choosing to believe twisted logic. One thing I can state for a fact that cannot be debunked. When people claim global warming is extapol, horse manure, they use voodoo. They use studies from scientists who try to disclaim what is over-documented with practically uncountable amounts of scientific research data proof. People who claim global warming exist use actuality, uncountable thousands of miles of, if put into paper form, which in many cases it is, of statistical data. Stratosphere, the ozone depletion, the amount of water left on the earth, the temperature at the poles, the temperature of the earth, the greenhouse syndrome, which is occurring. The shakedown syndrome, the Great Barrier Reefs, the ocean temperature, which has raised 9 degrees in some areas. The change in precipitation, snow, rain, film with correlations, taking it every year to 10 years. Research data that has existed since quantitative science has. People who refuse to acknowledge global warming generally have an agenda of destruction, or they are living in denial. They have a reason, perhaps just to be contrary, but it is one of the most unnecessary, unnecessary existences in the face of man. We have important things to do. As I was stating about the Earth and tilting, what I was getting to, if the one world order, which is outlined in the Bible and now becoming very obvious, had spent a fifth of what they had spent destroying the Earth, its people on there, torturing them to death maliciously, choosing the worst means of death, lethal injection, mercury, toxins, radioactive death, cancer, diseases. They synthesize, drop micro-explosive dust. They just like to kill. And if they'd spent a fifth of that in improving conditions, allowing the reduction of fossil fuel use, which they've had, CO2 converters, oxygen manufacturers, they have them on planes, an expansion plan. The world's population can fit into the greater Los Angeles area. Utilizing assets, resources to the most of man's ability, reason. They just like to kill. Statement. Research what I'm telling you. Research my web, www.globalrescuecommission.com. You go through it and see the reality of what it is, the documentation, the research studies, the links, the news studies, videos where you can see all this. Get to the additional pages I've done where I'm warning that quakes will start southern below LA, the West Coast area, and begin a chain reaction, a snowball effect. Here they are. That is fact. Anyone who wants to be contrary and take the time to disagree with it is not even worth the consideration you would give a dead skunk on the side of the road. It is time to get rid of the one world order, and it starts here. Tracing the evidence and the paths of what is on my website alone, let alone people who researched the one world order for decades and the different things they have caused. We take a look at it. A Jewish individual out of Austria, Johann Schicklgruber, a penniless vagabond, psychotic, with Jewish advisors. Even Kissinger, one of his main advisors, his nephew on the staff of Nixon's staff, gets the backing through the crowned heads of Europe. They co-signed, approved for the Jewish banking industry to eradicate Jews. Junkies, cripples, mental defectives, which, well, he qualified amply. This has been going on for at least 1,700 years. Europeans, they know and accept this. Just like the East Coast, you say neighborhood politician instead of mafia. There is no mafia. You don't say the word out loud. Through Europe, through Scandinavia, Britain, who's a big part of it, they don't discuss it. When things happen, it's just like most Americans. When a boat, a jet, a plane, some of the best researchers, scientists, medicals in the world, crashes, sinks, all dead. on their way to a convention to cure AIDS. People go, oh. And they hush up like they're at risk for saying something. They're at risk for not saying something. How does it begin here to eradicate them? Simple. There are laws, budgetary codes of conduct, criminal laws, international laws that have to do with how politicians, international figures conduct themselves, act, legislate, manipulate. It is time to start demanding that the EPA, CDCP, NOAA, IRS, State Department, Departments Labor, Fish and Game, Wildlife, Agriculture, BLM, Parks and Rec, Oceansides, all of them, NASA, be intricately investigated for all activity contrary to human life, anti-personnel, towards the destruction of the United States, the declination of independence. With replacements ready to go into their place, many have. A corruption cleansing is happening, as you can see. The air is changing, and many congressmen are attempting to jump on there. Most of the senators voted for a fast-track law where the beast in what was the outhouse was declaring himself tyrant after a phone call from GW. That's correct, the whacker. That he says a law, it's law. No Senate, no Congress, no people, nobody could countermand it. That was the fast-track law. A full publication, isolation until it leads back to where it originates. Bad, twisted versions of CIA operations. It is not the Central Intelligence Agency. And those of you out there parading around, bashing cars, destroying the amendment for freedom of speech, destroying this country, buildings, crashing the university, you're a big part of the problem. You're not attacking the real enemy. Study it. Take a look at it. Antifa, with its post, attempting to collect money and for weapons, claiming they're going to do a revolution. We had a revolution. And what was formed, the government, will work if you stand up alongside the veterans and use it. When the investigations all lead back and people say they were operating on orders that lead back to G.W. Bush, which come from the senior, even through Cheney. They were afraid for their jobs, their lives, and they did what they were told. Soldiers that you know, personnel, pilots, went to briefing, went to warehouses, examined the drums, which were loaded onto jets, onto missiles. They even used the 4th of July. And they got in there and sprayed bacterial, fungus, viruses, carcinogens, a dust specifically designed to attack your lungs. The air on the West Coast goes all over. That's why the decontamination efforts, the primary ones, for the radioactivity here, started on the East Coast and Great Lakes, Idaho. Bald eagles dropping dead with traces of cesium-134, 137 in their brain with tumors. Idaho, that's not on the West Coast. To attack Americans' lungs while they're working, playing, toiling their lives away. Part of you has already decided if you work, the soil is in you along with your blood in the soil one way or another, that you're going to wind up a part of it. They climbed into planes and sprayed nano-explosive dust, smaller than microbes, and then had Russians set fire, UN troops, American soldiers, American pilots that you grew up next to, drank beer with, talked about the future and what you wanted, watched you work yourself to an early grave for the to pay for the privilege of working, flew over and sprayed these things to bring radiation back down, which they'd already sent. Mass murder. Read it. Read the proof. Get it through your head. Mass murder America. Disasters on the West Coast, they've been trying to. Who owns the corporations? The business still pushes a lot of the buttons in the government. Obviously, the military, which is a shame, with all the dedicated people who put themselves directly in front of bullets, shrapnel, and some of the most miserable conditions that surpass human torture to protect you, which is what the next branch of the military, the CIA, does. Yes, part of it has been subverted. That is a fact. Along with security agents which were meant to protect you. Perverted. The NSA. The NSA is a tool for the destruction of the United States of America, which attacks, harasses, harangues, and attempts to prevent people who work night and day, who once had young faces, large healthy bodies, to provide you your next day. A great deal of your government is working to do that, and a great deal of the military. Quite a few of them, if they sleep 4 hours a damn night, they're lucky. The least you can do for the memory of everything that this country stands for and the freedoms is to fight alongside them. Not in the streets, not destroying what other Americans have built, not attacking the police who are trying to keep some remembrance of America when Coke was still cola, the joint a bad place to be, when it was safe for women and children to walk the street, men out of bars without being attacked, people being attacked because other people profile them and say they're probably anti-us. Send an email, a text, a message on your fancy phones. That's what they're for. To the White House. We know everything that you're doing and has been going on. The corruption in the government has to end. This is up for and by the people. This is God's country. How dare you do this to us? How dare you allow this? America is on its way down. We came within 1.5% of going under financially. A disaster on the West Coast, just what the whacker, the One World Order wants. If you disagree with the Bible, first read the translation from their Aramaic. You'll be amazed. Being seeded here from other planets, as much for sanctuary we know now, brings up the question, how many other worlds have been destroyed by the same beast, the same methods, the same twistings? Would force rationing, would force total control, devastation. open to the west from North Korea, monkeys. Genetically or evolutionary backwards monkeys, psychos. The south from cartels. The governor has taken steps farther and declared the entire state sanctuary. I watched a video with Nancy Delotted Pelosi. I'm not sure how she got to even her position. She's not qualified to work with dogs in a kennel. Attempted to stand up for them and said, yes, let's hand the country over to carpetbaggers from another country who are here demanding your country, your place, and everything that you've earned because they want it. They showed up at a news release. Pelosi was supporting them, legislation to try to keep DACA alive, to allow sanctuary for people to come in and have amnesty for what many Americans, some people watching this, have gone to jail for. IRS, traffic tickets, lost their homes, businesses, jobs, had to pay through courts. Worse, lost their families. These people are given a pass in everything that you've earned. In California, special medical services. Everyone is paying exorbitant gas, cigarette, alcohol, which is already taxed under the sin tax. It was already double. It's tax on top of tax. Does constitutional law count for anything? Even no taxation without representation. Has declared the entire state sanctuary. Is handing over an entire region, civilization, to people who either trashed their own or didn't bother making their own regions better. But they're here, rioting, protesting, pissing on your laws and everything that the veterans have fought for, you have worked for. Everyone you've ever seen look up from a bed and say, I can't get out of bed anymore. People we put into the dirt. Demanding it like uncivilized dogs. And casting an insult on every goddamn honest, God-fearing, religious Christian family that's come from the same region, that has come here quietly, hat in handed. No welfare. Paid all of their fees, their fines. They've worked quietly. When other people come to get in line at the theater, they say, no, they move out of the way. When they're abused by agencies, by people, their own, frauds, snakes, they say they don't want any trouble. They work for 40 or 60 years to have a little bit of what you have. That's why we need committees to decide who is who. When the criminals were shipped, deported out of here, of course, some of them 20 times now, 3,500%? The rates went up in rape, armed robbery, in crimes. The Mexican people there, the decent people, our cousins, were up in arms protesting, bringing them back here. Send a message to the White House, the State Department, your congressmen, who may be corrupt also. Maybe you'll get lucky and find one of the few. One who is attempting to legislate laws that everyone in the political system has to use the same medical coverage that they legislate for people. Another in California. You don't hear about these. Who is working to stop the construction of 2 bridges, of course, formed by we can guess who, to steal the rest of the water from the Delta, which goes to our farmlands. Of course, to L.A., Many of the rich people are upset their swimming pools and fountains because of the drought had to be depleted. Send a message. You demand an investigation, a public investigation as to why, after even the White House, the government was instigators in research studies proving that disturbance manipulation of any of the western regions would cause chain reaction devastation. Did they go ahead and do it anyway? Have bank records, transfers, everything else produced and publicized as to what and how much they received. Let the people, let the world know what they gained for the devastation of people's dreams and futures. Tell them you want the Halliburton Company taken the hell out of any influence on American government. That you want a full investigation to the bushwhacking eras, correlated to every single possible law, starting at a kindergarten and city council level up to an international budgetary criminal level. Genocide. The United Nations completely redone. Their International Court Crimes Against Humanity convicted Saddam and didn't do a damn thing about the genocide occurring in America with Fukushima and other attacks, and that's what they are. The other side has a great advantage. Listen, y'all. There are things that completely destroy evil. Extopol, horseshit, twistings, the father of lies. Instead of looking at the studies and saying, yes, if we approve and expand fracking offshore drilling, it will destroy these people's lives, cultures, civilizations, dreams. Open up America to attack from the West, from the South, the military, National Guard, the government, ECS, emergency civilian services, will be completely tied up, hamstrung, open for invasion from the North, from the Slavics, which have been very overt about their intent to invade America. Destroy it. That means physically torture, smash, and execute most of its people, to which you are one. And it would give control to corporations and different entities that are controlled still by Bush. The advantage that the One World Order has, I was saying, read the Bible, the translation from Aramaic. The things you will find are astounding. All of this is spelled out that it will happen, in detailed in names in some cases. They know it's a war. They've declared it, instigated it, manipulated it, strategized it, and are actuating it. You who refuse to acknowledge that are at a disadvantage. You're a chicken waiting for slaughter, even if you don't like that. Look at the statistics. Look at the areas and how they're affected. It's a matter of the roll of the dice when the next region's number comes up. A sitting duck until you acknowledge it and step beside shoulder to shoulder with the veterans who have maintained the Constitution, the freedom, our way of life, our culture, the right to life. You are a victim in waiting. When you press the first button and send these messages, We are not going to take this anymore. All of the evidence, the paths of destruction, of willful mass genocide, the vax, food, the water poisonings, the proliferation of oil lines which are regularly breaking, polluting millions of gallons of water, destroying the circulation of the earth. It's all foretold. It's all part of a bigger plan. Foresight is better than hindsight. If you look at the patterns, even the patterns of how Americans were treated, the conveyance, reduced, trashed, just as in the Nazi to Jewish Holocaust. It's the same. You told yourself you would get up and fight. You don't even have to ball your fist. All you have to do is press a button. And if you tell 10 friends, 100 friends to do the same, to tell others to do the same, they will wake up to find multi-millions of fighters saying they're in the spotlight, and there's no excuses, and there's no running away. We want everything in the government, all the processes accounted for from now on. Support your military. Demand a moratorium on warfare being deployed into areas, regions, circumstances, conditions that will cause devastation / genocide on the people. I believe that all of the foods containing poison, all of the water, the oil, the sulfur, the uranium, glyphosate, the frankenfood, all of the radiation brought here, all of the NASA chemicals sprayed should be collected by active Americans and returned to the source. That's not a threat. It's not an act of hostility or terrorism. A statement. You generated it. It's good enough for the American people. It's good enough for you. The vax should all be brought back and proportionately forced on the people who legislated it. If you believe in the Bible and call yourself a Christian, now is the time to push the button. All of the evidence, all of the facts, all of the research study, all of the news, all of it is self-evident and right there. If you claim to be a Christian, read the Bible. Not the sanitized version, the original, where you see this too. You would have to refute God in order not to stand up. And you owe it to the children, to the elder people, to the infants. You owe it to the teen. If you are a teen, you owe it to your future to do this. Support the Global Rescue Commission. Take a few minutes a week, a month, and help us. Support ARM, the American Restoration and Preservation Movement. Your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, your grandparents, a lot of you, your parents, had to stand up and be counted as Christians and proponents of the American way. Do it. As far as Antifa, During the Rodney King riots, all of the police all over were told, let them get it out of their system. More than, what was it, 89, 90% or more of the illegals, carpetbaggers here, smashing and even killing and raping and everything else, taking, were allowed to do that. If there is to be a civil war from these, excuse me, dickless, gutless, hypocritical, destructionary bastards trying to destroy what's left of your heritage, home, and freedoms, I don't think it would be a bad thing if on the date of their revolution, or they show themselves in public, that they would be declared open targets. And if enough people, like the Rodney King riots, actually stood up and prevented them from revolutionizing, perhaps the government would say, well, let them get it out of their system. The same as those Muslim terrorists parading around, posting, yelling, stating that there will come a time where they demand Christians and Jews all be executed, that they will attack. The more than 100,000 in New York City, in our territory, screaming death to America. Where in the fuck is the courage, the gumption, the wherewithal that your fathers, your parents, your aunts, uncles, all of the people that you looked up to had? Had they been here now? Had the veterans been treated decently? If honorable citizens were not prosecuted to allow invaders to destroy here, to demand their way, to try to install their culture over ours? Perhaps if enough of you stood up and said, the next time a bunch of inner-bred, shit-for-brains, violent, destructionary terrorists get up and say, death to America, we're going to stop them. The decision is yours, and now is the time to make it.